Hello again, rail fans, and welcome back to another video. We began this previous month's journey on June 2nd, 2022, and we are located outside the Central Ohio Model Railroad Club in Worthington, Ohio. On this day, we were once again here for the weekly operating session. When that was all said and done with, I decided to go outside and see if any trains would come before I had to leave for the night. The one train I did end up seeing while I was here was Norfolk Southern southbound mixed freight train 171 on an evening journey from Conway, Pennsylvania to Chattanooga, Tennessee. The ambient horn that you're hearing in the background as 171 approaches was the CSX beer plant switcher as he was leaving the beer plant on his way back to Crestline. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see that. After catching NS 171 at the COMRC Club, we then moved several days later to June 6th, 2022, and we are located next to the Route 161 railroad crossing in Worthington, Ohio, next to CSX's Columbus subdivision. Earlier that morning, while I was watching the virtual Railfan camera up in Fostoria, I noticed tank cars passing the camera on the Y between the Willard subdivision and the Columbus subdivision. After doing a little research, I noticed that it was B651, combined with another ethanol train which I unfortunately don't know the symbol for, so it was two ethanol trains combined into one, resulting in one unit up front and 3 mid-train DPUs. Knowing the opportunity that was being presented to me, I decided to go out and see if we can catch this. As you can probably tell by this picture here, there was a clear signal for a southbound train as soon as we got here. With avid YouTuber Yanatron 9000 in the background, I would come to realize that the clear signal was not for the train I was expecting to see. The green signal was actually for an empty coal train, specifically E617, on a mad dash from Miller, Indiana back to the mines in Russell, Kentucky for another load of coal. About 30 minutes after the empty coal train cleared, and after temporarily saying goodbye to Yanatron 9000, I noticed headlights of a northbound train coming up the Columbus subdivision. The northbound in question was actually another coal train, specifically a loaded one, C632, coming out of the mines in Danville, West Virginia, and heading back to Gibson, Indiana. Soon after the loaded coal train cleared, Yanatron 9000 returned once again, and we waited for about 30 minutes before we saw the headlights of our train. B651 is an as-needed loaded ethanol train coming off of the Canadian Pacific in Bensenville, Illinois, and heading for Charlotte, North Carolina. On this day, B651 had a nice addition leading, which was a rebuilt EMD SD70 ACU. After a solid couple minutes of tanker cars crossing the railroad crossing here, we then find the trio of mid-train DPUs. The CP AC4400CW was supposed to be an end-train DPU for B651, while the CSX CM44AH and AC4400CW were originally assigned to lead the other half of the ethanol train before they were combined together as one train. After seeing the combined ethanol train, we then moved several days later onto June 9th, 2022, and we are located at the Powell Road Overpass in Powell, Ohio, next to Norfolk Southern Sandusky District. On this day, my family had to do some business in the area. Once that was said and done with, and as we were crossing the bridge, I noticed headlights of a southbound train coming towards it. As it would turn out, I would have enough time to set up and wait for the train. The train that I would end up seeing would be an unidentified southbound loaded ethanol train bound for the eastern seaboard. Considering I didn't get the symbol of this ethanol train, there could be 3 potential places that this load of ethanol would be going to off of the top of my head. Today's load of ethanol could have either been going to North Carolina, Georgia, or Florida, but I cannot be for sure as I didn't get the symbol. on that day, we would then find ourselves at the Central Ohio Model Railroad Club in Worthington, Ohio once again for the weekly operating session. Unfortunately, as soon as I got there, traffic on the COMRC's main lines were pretty busy, so I decided to wait to see if that traffic would die down a bit and hopefully catch a train or two while I was doing so. The trend of one-train deals at the Model Railroad Club would continue this week when northbound mixed freight train 170 showed up on the Sandusky district. Norfolk Southern 170 is a daily Chattanooga, Tennessee to Conway, Pennsylvania mixed freight train. Among the general merchandise and trash, 170 on this day for some strange reason had a cut of intermodal cars tucked in behind the power. Also, further within the train, 170 also had a large cut of new UTLX tank cars. After catching the Norfolk Southern trains, we then moved several days later onto June 12, 2022, and we are back at the Route 161 railroad crossing in Worthington, Ohio, next to CSX's Columbus subdivision. On this day, I got a heads up from a friend that another loaded ethanol train was bound for the eastern seaboard that was profiled to come down the Columbus subdivision, specifically CSX B831. B831 is an as-needed loaded ethanol train coming off of the Canadian Pacific Railway in Bensenville, Illinois, bound for Tampa, Florida. Considering most of the Tampa-bound ethanol trains don't run the Columbus subdivision, I have reason to believe that this ethanol train was a reroute. In addition to this train's combined foreign power from Canadian Pacific and Union Pacific, and I was also testing out a new tripod that I recently got, I decided to come out and see if I can catch this. The green signal that I saw shortly after we got here stayed green for about 45 minutes before B831 screams his way through Worthington on his way to the Sunshine State. And to be honest, I never thought I would hear myself saying this. With my phone up high on the tripod, I decided to reposition in hopes of getting a nice shot of the Union Pacific DPU, and as it turned out, it worked out just fine. After catching another ethanol train on CSX's Columbus subdivision, we then move a couple of days later onto June 14th, 2022, and we are located in Kyleville, Ohio, which is next to CSX's Scottslong Secondary, at milepost 117. During the previous week, I received a new camera and tripod. When I caught the ethanol train in the previous scene, I was testing out my tripod. And today, I wanted to test out my new camera, and I thought that the easiest way to do that was to catch the intermodal train that runs on the Scottslong Secondary, which is CSX I-147, which runs between Buckeye Yard in Columbus, Ohio, to the Giant Yard in North Baltimore. By the time I-147 reached Kyleville, it was time to put my new camera up to the test. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't pleased with the quality of the audio that was coming out of this camera, but hey, this is why we test things, people. Now, I've seen I-147 run with DPUs in the past, but all those other times, the DPU was on the back of the train. However, today, I-147 had its DPU in the middle. After testing out my new camera, we then move a couple of days later onto June 16th, 2022, and we are located outside the Central Ohio Model Railroad Club in Worthington, Ohio. As per usual, we were here today for the weekly operating session. When the weekly operating session was done and over with, I went outside to see if any trains would pass by the club before I had to leave for the night.
It could be worse as a hot air balloon. No, remember the hot air balloon?
And sure enough, there was a train coming before I had to leave for the night, which was an unidentified Norfolk Southern southbound mixed freight train going down the Sandusky district, which I have reason to believe it's 194, but I'm not 100% sure. After catching that Norfolk Southern train, we would then venture out to the state of Illinois and visit 4 fantastic places in the state. I'll leave a link in the description for those videos just in case you missed them. We would then move a couple of days after we returned to the state of Ohio on June 23rd, 2022, and we are once again back at the Central Ohio Model Railroad Club in Worthington, Ohio. Just like every other week, we were here for the weekly operating session. However, when we pulled into the parking lot, I noticed some of the other members standing next to the railroad tracks across the street, which suggested that a train was coming. After a little bit of time waiting, I then noticed that there actually was a train coming, which was Norfolk Southern 194 heading southbound down the Sandusky district from Bellevue, Ohio to Portsmouth, Ohio. Only a minute or so went by after 194 cleared when here came Norfolk Southern Mixed Freight Train 195, heading northbound from Portsmouth, Ohio to Bellevue, Ohio on the Sandusky District. The surprise on this train was the Union Pacific ST-70AH in the trailing position. After seeing those two Norfolk Southern trains pass the club, we then returned to the same location a week later on June 30th, 2022 for another week of running model trains for the weekly operating session. At some point during the operating session, one of the other members that wasn't running model trains mentioned that a northbound Norfolk Southern train was lined through this section of main line passing the club. With that knowledge in mind, I had to tie down the train that I was running on the layout so I can see whatever this mystery northbound train ended up being. The northbound train in question ended up being a Norfolk Southern empty grain train. However, we're about to find out that this was not just your typical grain train. The grain train revealed that it was combined with a northbound empty ethanol train at some point during its journey. The power for the ethanol train before it was combined with the grain train was a Norfolk Southern C44-9W and a Canadian National SD70M-2. A little while later, after I finished running the train I had on the layout when the combined train passed the club, I then found a midpoint to take a break during the operating session. The first train to show up while I was here, since there were two trains in the area, was a Norfolk Southern southbound mixed freight train going down the Sandusky district. After the mixed freight train cleared, the other northbound train was lined to come up this leg of the Sandusky district, which was a Norfolk Southern loaded coal train. loaded coal train passed the Model Railroad Club, that was the final train that we saw for the night, and I unfortunately didn't have much time left to run some of the other model trains I brought with me. Which now brings us to the conclusion of another video. Now, some of you may be wondering why I didn't upload this video prior to uploading the videos covering my Galesburg trip. To simply put it, considering the magnitude of the videos that I was going to make covering that trip, it made it a higher priority project. Also, I knew that I was going to catch a small handful of trains after I got back, so I decided to hold off till I caught those. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed all the trains that were in this video. Leave a like and or a comment to share your thoughts on this video. If you enjoy the content that I produce, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and tapping the bell button to be notified when a new video gets posted. Anyways, that's all for now. This is All Ohio Railfan, signing off.